Dr. Laura Goldstein is a licensed psychologist and founder of Gold Psych Services in Coral Springs, Florida. With a deep commitment to neurodiversity affirming care, she specializes in neurodiversity assessment and leads support groups for parents of children with pathological demand avoidance. Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge is a mental health expert and author of It's Going to Be Okay. She hosts a parenting podcast, Dysregulated Kids, a Connecticut certified school psychologist and board certified neurofeedback provider. She specializes in nervous system-based approaches that support children and teens with ADHD, autism, and anxiety. Dr. Melissa Wally-Packwood is an accessibility advocate, learning specialist, and adjunct instructor at Beacon College in Florida, America's first accredited baccalaureate institution dedicated to educating students with learning and attention issues. She supports neurodivergent students in their transition to college and careers through executive functioning coaching, universal design for learning practices, and AI-supported skill building strategies. She also provides professional development and conference presentations focusing on UDL and inclusive instructional design innovation. And we're going to begin our conversation with Dr. Goldstein. How do you differentiate PDA from oppositional defiant disorder when conducting neurodiversity assessments?
This is such an important question because on the surface, PDA and ODD can really look similar. Both have the refusal, the defiance, the power struggles. So when I'm doing an assessment, I'm really looking at the root and the function of those behaviors. With ODD, the behaviors are anger-based. So we see things like irritability, argumentativeness, even vindictiveness. And the emotional tone is resentful or hostile. Whereas with PDA, the behaviors that look like defiance or argumentativeness, those avoidance behaviors, they're really rooted in anxiety. So I'm looking at a child's behavior to see what is that root and function of the behavior. With a PDA child, I'm looking to see how they're perceiving those demands, which a PDA child perceives as a threat to their autonomy. That kicks in their dysregulation in their nervous system, which sends them to fight or flight, fawn or freeze. So those behaviors, I'm not just looking at to check a yes or no box. Is a child oppositional or defiant? I'm looking at, is it anger-based or is it a panic response to that perceived loss of control?
All right, thank you. Dr. Kapana-Hodge, from a nervous system perspective, what's happening during a PDA meltdown as compared to a typical tantrum?
Well, a PDA meltdown versus a typical tantrum, they are different because in PDA, individuals perceive everyday demands as a threat. And that means it activates our emotional centers in the brain, which is controlled by the amygdala. And they go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn and become super activated. So their goal is to avoid what is perceived as a threat. Where with kids who have a tantrum, it's much more goal-oriented. They want something and they have a tantrum. So for example, I want a cookie, you say no, and they get angry about it. So that difference between the two is really about nervous system activation, and somebody with PDA is in a constant activation.
All right, thank you. Dr. Packwood, can you tell us how universal design for learning can help reduce the impact of demands for a student in a classroom setting?
Sure. UDL is a really great tool or strategy to use, especially for instructors. Basically, it allows some flexibility. With UDL, we're looking at how can we provide flexibility in how we present information, how students receive information, and how they give output to show what they know. So when you have that kind of flexibility built into your curriculum, it allows those who may struggle with certain types of activities, certain types of output due to perhaps some learning disabilities or anxiety responses. It helps them to have options as well as time to go through those options and consider what works best for them and their learning style, as well as their level of stress with each activity. So for example, I might provide a menu of options that students can choose from. For example, I might say, hey, if you want to share what you know about this topic to show that you are focused in class, I might provide options such as polls, discussion posts, or verbal communication in class. I could also show an option such as, hey, would you like to write on this whiteboard that's handheld what your answer is? Or use a card of some sort to show if it's yes or no when you reply to the answer. That gives options so that the ball is in the person's court rather than the ball is solely in the instructor's court and more of a demand. I will say that this works sometimes, not always, but it's our best shot at gaining some of that buy-in, some of that focus in class, but also getting to know what the student knows so that we can, in fact, grade them and say, yes, they know this information.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Goldstein, can you share with us some of the misconceptions that parents bring to your PDA support groups and how you go about reframing their expectations?
Yeah, so I generally see two categories of misconceptions. One is about the parents themselves, and the other is about the child's intentions. So for parents themselves, I see parents who interpret their own behaviors as perhaps they've been too permissive, too inconsistent. Maybe they haven't found the right rewards and consequences yet to motivate their child. So they believe they're at fault in some ways for their child's behavior. The other type of misconception is about their child's intentions. So parents mistakenly think that their child is lazy or being manipulative or is deliberately trying to be controlling. And parents haven't yet learned that PDA is anxiety-based and that it's rooted in the nervous system and the dysregulation that comes from perceiving the demand as a loss of autonomy. So in group, we try to change this lens. We look at changing the parent from thinking, how can I get my child to comply, to how can I make my child feel safe enough to not perceive every request as a demand. And this change can be very difficult for parents because they may have spent years rooted in these misconceptions about themselves and their child. But once we can make that mindset shift, magic happens, right? Parents really start to understand their children and they can better understand how they can parent their kids.
All right, thank you. So Dr. Kapana-Hodge, for parents who aren't familiar with neurofeedback or biofeedback, can you explain to us how using those tools can help children with PDA regulate their autonomic responses to demands?
Yeah, brain tools such as neurofeedback, biofeedback, PEMF, what they do is help regulate that nervous system so that you have regulation capacity. The goal here isn't to make kids more compliant. We're reducing that hyper alert baseline to increase flexibility and create a window of tolerance for stress, because these kids in that hyper alert state are constantly overactivated. And when we train their brain to be more balanced, they are able to connect, be more collaborative, and learn.
So Dr. Packwood, can AI tools help reframe academic tasks into more collaborative, optional feeling experiences for children with PDA?
Sure. So AI is another optional tool that we can utilize to help remove some of the demand, whether we're placing it on ourselves or someone else's, which then lowers that perceived threat and calms things in our nervous system. One of the tools I use often is Goblin tool online. I usually go through the web. It is at this time free. I would imagine there's a paid version at some point, of course. But basically, it's got a lot of different ways to help you with executive functioning. For example, it's got what's called a magic to-do. You can put a task name or description in, and it will break it down into parts. You can also estimate how long it will take you to do the thing you need to do. You can also add in extra time. If you know something's going to be a little bit tough for you or there's a decision to make, you can kind of add some extra time into your day so that if you start to have that response, you still have time to go through that, walk through it, recuperate, and then get back to the task. Additionally, Goblin tool has options like the formalizer and the judge, which will help you to understand the tone of an email or a text because that is notoriously difficult, especially for neurodiverse individuals to understand, especially if it's a new person or if it's a very professional correspondence, and that's maybe not something you're used to as a freshman. Additionally, I use Boodlebox a lot. It has the option for me to build bots, for example, a learning specialist bot, which is my position here at Beacon. I utilize that when students are interested so that they can break down time management tasks or how their day should go so that they can plan it out on a visual schedule. Additionally, I often will use Gemini or ChatGPT to show students how they can use it as a tool to create memes, GIFs, or find inspirational quotes to kind of help them through their day when they're feeling stuck or stressed. Again, those need to be optional tools to use because the second we place a demand, it could be perceived as a threat. But I do offer that in addition to my services here at the college so that students do have options that take a person out of the equation that they may otherwise maybe have a reaction to because the demands are stressful.
All right. So, Dr. Goldstein, in neurodiversity affirming care, how do you help a child with PDA build a sense of autonomy?
Yeah, so in therapy, I really try to be intentional about making the therapy space feel safe and collaborative rather than directive. So we know that a PDA child is going to perceive any kind of demand as a loss of control. And so if therapy becomes about just another adult trying to control them, we've already lost safety and therapy is not going to be effective. So I try to build autonomy by giving a child real choices, being indirect in my language, and inviting a child rather than instructing them. So what this looks like is instead of let's work on coping skills, I might say something like, I wonder or I'm curious about what you think might help in those moments when things are really difficult. Want to brainstorm with me? So you're inviting that collaboration and not dictating what the child is going to do. The goal is not compliance. The goal is to help a child experience that they're capable and respected and in partnership with you. So when a child feels that shared power, whether it be in their personal life or in the therapeutic relationship, that shared power is going to help them lower the nervous system activation. Their nervous system is going to settle. And ultimately, that's what's going to have an impact in therapy.
All right. So, Dr. Kapana Hodge, how does your regulation first protocol help to address the high anxiety drive that's behind demand avoidance?
You know, demand avoidance for an individual with PDA is really how they manage anxiety. And they're avoiding these tasks because they're trying to reduce that internal overwhelm, that uncomfortableness that's going on within their brain and body. And regulation first means we're calming the nervous system, we're calming the body before we introduce demands, before we try to connect, and before we try to teach. And when we do this, we're teaching them to regulate through things like co-regulation, and co-regulation can occur between parent and child, caregiver and child, teacher and child. We're lowering our language. Kids with PDA are very threatened by too much language because they're already in a hypervigilant state. And we're offering autonomous choices, not too many, but enough where they have control, because people with anxiety need to have some level of control that's safe. And when that nervous system is safe, flexibility is going to increase naturally, and we have less demand avoidance.
All right, thank you. So, Dr. Packwood, can you share with us any kind of executive functioning scaffolds that can help PDA students make the transition to the greater independence they'll find in college?
So one of the things that we do work on is organization, and everybody has a preference for how they want to stay organized. One of the tools that we do utilize at Beacon is visual schedules. Some people like to have paper planners. Some people like digital organization, such as their Outlook calendar attached to their email. But we also have this visual schedule that is very flexible if a student chooses to use it, and we do encourage it because you can color code it, you can change it because it's digital, it's printable. But many students will utilize that to help them organize their week. They can come in and see their learning specialist for help adjusting it as needed if they join a new club, or if a club just doesn't feel right for them and we need to take it off, if they need more study time or less. But that is student initiated for the most part. We want them to have those self-advocacy skills, but we're here to support if we notice something is slipping. Hey, what do you think we should do about that? How do you think we should address that? Do you have any ideas about what might have worked before that we could use now? So a lot of those open-ended questions will support us in adjusting the visual schedule as well as other challenges. For example, if somebody is struggling because they feel like their cognitive load is too heavy, there's just too much on their mind, it could be that the syllabus is tough to navigate. Perhaps Canvas, our learning management software, is new to them. Maybe they didn't utilize that before and it's new. And so there are add-ons through Google that you can utilize, like Better Canvas, aka Better Campus. There's a lot of options out there. But basically, we want to see what is the challenge, what can we offer to support, and that can be very individualized. We also want to ask, again, those open-ended questions. What do you think will help? How can I support you in this? Because really, at this point, they are adults. They need to be respected like adults. And in addition to that, the person who knows themselves best is that person. So I'm just there to kind of be a sounding board and a support, and I can offer suggestions as needed if needed.
All right. So, Dr. Goldstein, can you share with us the language shifts that need to take place in a family so that they move from a compliance model to a collaboration model?
Sure. So I think parents are often under the false belief that they need to exert control over their kids, that they need to show who's in charge. And of course, with PDA, we know that's going to create some huge problems because it's going to challenge their own autonomy. So if we make a statement like, go brush your teeth, this is a demand and we're likely not going to get compliance. If we approach instead from a collaborative point of view, like, it's time to brush our teeth, would you like to do it before pajamas or after pajamas? Now we're inviting that collaboration. Or if we say something like, it's time to get off your video game, again, not likely to get compliance. But if instead we approach from a place of curiosity and collaboration, and we say something like, I'm curious what your character is up to in this game. Want to show me real quick before you pause it? Now we're inviting moments of intentional connection and collaboration. And approaching from that place of collaboration and curiosity is much more likely going to get that compliance. We also know that approaching from this perspective versus giving ultimatums, like if you don't get off your iPad, then you're not going to get dessert later. We're giving that ultimatum is also going to create those huge problems. So we can help by saying things like, what would make this moment easier for you? What would help you transition from getting off your iPad? Or what would make getting dressed more doable in this moment? Again, approaching from curiosity and collaborating with the child. That language matters, and that language is going to make the difference for your child.
So, Dr. Kapanahaj, could you share with us, for children who have PDA and co-occurring anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, for instance, where should intervention begin in the family?
It doesn't matter what the layers that each individual is struggling with. At its core, we have to focus on regulating the autonomic nervous system, because no intervention is going to stick unless that nervous system is regulating, and that's biology. And so I talk about 3 steps. Number 1, we're going to stabilize the autonomic nervous system and that stress response so that we're creating greater capacity so people are less reactive. Step 2, we're going to build co-regulation and safety, and that's through a regulated adult. They don't even have to say anything. Their nervous system being regulated becomes their emotional anchor. And step 3, once you're in what I call the yellow zone through co-regulation and hopefully moving towards green, you can gradually layer in skill building. And you have to think of additionally, you have to think of what are the things that are really causing a person with PDA or related conditions to activating. If OCD is there, then we know obsessive compulsive behaviors or extreme anxiety around a fear is likely going to cause that nervous system to be in an activated state. That's why regulating first is critical in order for those beautiful interventions to take hold.
So, Dr. Packwood, for students with PDA who find visual schedules too demanding or restrictive, how can they be adapted?
So we can look at what the student prefers. Maybe they had something that worked before, such as a list. Bullet journals are becoming more and more popular, where if you don't finish something on your list, you just carry it over to the next week or the next day. You talk about long and short-term goals. So I definitely would say bullet journals are an option. Additionally, there are other options. And again, I said list, visual schedule. We can also utilize something like your learning management software calendar, such as your Outlook or your Canvas. We could also talk about what you think works. Some people do prefer a paper planner. Some people are very resistant because they've been pushed to use a planner or a schedule of some sort over and over again. I would also say that, we have phones now, which are fantastic for giving us alerts. Perhaps if you've got your favorite song and you don't mind using that as an alert, then that could help you wake up in the morning, could help you get to class on time. And then you don't have to worry so much about, hey, am I following this visual schedule that, my instructor or my parents think I should use? The big thing is we want to scaffold towards independence. At this point, we're talking about adults who need to be able to be as independent as possible. And the goal is full independence when possible. So yeah, we want to work with them on whatever technique might help. And we can always suggest others. We can give a list or a menu of options. But I have noticed that a lot of students in today's higher ed landscape do use their phones a lot, and their phones are with them a lot. So that tends to be a good option for those who are opposed to visual schedules or planners.
All right, well, that will have to be our last word. Dr. Lauren Goldstein, Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge, and Dr. Melissa Wally Packwood. Thanks for the knowledge.